Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back another video from Annie News, continuing with the solo leveling content for season 2. This is covering episode 11. I have not watched episode 12 yet. I like to, again, I always say this, but like I like to wait until I've done these so that I don't get confused with stuff that I've just watched from recent episodes. Really looking forward to that. But this was so sick. Like the S ranks just got whooped. The poor healer dude didn't even want to be there in the first place, and then it's just like, oh. But yeah, let's see what was left out, or possibly added, I don't know.
I guess solo leveling really knows what the fans want. What could have been an emotional scene highlighting what's at stake and the diminishing faith Korea has in its hunters was instead a Sakuga-filled anime original scene of Cha fighting the Ant Queen.
Oh, cool. So they did add something. Sick.
Awesome, but you know as much as I do, one appeals more to the mainstream than the other.
Oh, yeah.
That being the case, allow me to build up that tension and set the tone for you, since a lot of the little scenes which do exactly that were left out. We'll also go through how it is the raid really went down, since there's a bit more to be said from both the Korean and Japanese side.
Oh, cool.
So, just as we do every week, here's everything that didn't make it into the anime. All the extra details to make your solo leveling experience a more complete one.
Ooh.
Episode 23. It's going to get even more intense.
Oh, yeah.
Covering chapters 96 to 100 from the manhwa, and chapters 115 to 118 from the web novel.
Okay.
Let's start things off at the beginning of Raid Day, where numerous warships would be deployed all from the coasts of China, Taiwan, Japan, and Korea. Despite half those countries not being involved, it seems others were preparing for the worst.
Right, they're just making sure. Precautionary, yes.
Korea naturally had several contingencies in place too, part of which was the large number of hunters stationed to the south. They were ready for any ants that might have fled to the mainland.
No, they... Could you imagine?
This is because, even in the case of a successful mission, there was a good chance at least a few ants would find their way there. So, with the number of hunters it required to take out just one, sending multiple
107, because they're all S-rank, aren't they, I suppose?
strike squads south certainly wasn't overly precautious at all.
Right.
Multiple other strike squads were stationed to defend national territory,
That's
each consisting of
crazy.
one B-rank leader, 3
So they reckon it would take 107 to take down
C ranks,
one.
then over 10 D and E ranks. They were groups comprised of both active and retired hunters.
Cool.
There were even those who awakened yet chose not to become hunters. All in all, it was a force totaling 5,000, so out of the 50,000 awakened that currently reside in Korea, that meant 1/10 of them showed up to defend their country.
Whoa.
A lot of these volunteers are people like the cameraman, who's a good example of someone who awakened yet chose not to become a hunter.
Yo, I'm hoping we get to know what the hell was going on with this guy in the episode as well. Like, it's just... Everyone's watching them all die, and it's like, how are they seeing this? How's he alive? He's B rank.
They're people who live a normal life due to raids just not being for them. For the main squad currently flying to Jeju Island, Guildmaster Ma was chosen as their leader.
He's so cool.
He was incredibly honored to be fighting alongside the people he was, because he knew he'd never be able to raid with such capable hunters again. It was while on the helicopter that Cha would ask Beck if he knew why Sung declined, a question to which he obviously said no. When Beck then asked why it was she wanted to know, a rare flustered Cha would answer no reason in particular. Shortly after is when the raid would commence,
She wants
leaving a
it.
small number of ants to attack the helicopter. Since not every ant was capable of flight, there were only 7 who had come out to meet them.
Right.
The thing is, Choi's fire wasn't actually enough to kill them. Yes, it was capable of burning away their wings, but the fact it couldn't one-shot them was a little concerning. It showed him that if he really wanted to incinerate them, then a lot more firepower was necessary. These evolved ants were no longer as easy to kill as they were in the last raid.
Oh, damn.
It's then that Choi would jump into the ant tunnels first, clearing all nearby enemies with a massive AoE burst upon landing.
Sick.
As if skydiving hands in pocket wasn't aura enough.
That's so aura farming, man.
Choi's one-liner after definitely was. So, if you didn't have an appreciation for Choi before, then these two panels together should change that. For the Japan squads who'd been fighting for about 10 minutes now, it was about time to initiate the next phase of their plan. The intended retreat, which would send every single ant back into the tunnels.
Oh, yeah, there's a sneaky little plan there. Spore.
It was right as Goto was about to give the order, though, that Team C's lack of comms would prevent him.
Ah.
There was a chance it was simply due to equipment failure, but considering the number of checks done to them beforehand, it was very unlikely that that was what was happening. So, because the order to retreat needed to be relayed to them too, Goto decided to make his way to them himself. If he didn't, proceeding with the plan would likely cause Team C to meet the same fate as the Korean hunters. It was a price Goto
These sneaky bastards, man. Whoa.
knew he couldn't afford, since when considering the subjugation operations that were to happen after this, Team C was far too important. Especially since, aside from Goto, they were composed of Japan's strongest. This is because Team C was positioned closest to the ant tunnel, so it made sense to ensure that they were the most stacked. That being the case,
God damn. Oh, right. So they were like the strong. Other than Goto. Damn.
lose them due to a fault of miscommunication, well, that was a cost which would hurt Japan greatly. Luckily, Goto and Team C had landed relatively close, so with his current speed, he figured he could get to them in about 10 minutes. Switching back to the Korean team, for the time being, they were relatively safe, with Choi's Flame Prison acting as a shield preventing the re-entry of Ant's B rank or lower. That meant they could venture deeper without the worry of being flanked from behind. It was a good application of a move typically used to tie up enemies. Inside, the tunnels were incredibly dark, creating for a dungeon experience that was fundamentally different. You see, where usually the insides of gates were lit up by illumination stones, no light here made it difficult to see anything. All they had was Choi's magic and the cameraman's flashlight.
Ah.
So,
Okay.
in addition to facing enemies who had evolved to see in the dark, they themselves could barely see anything. It was an added layer of difficulty that made things harder. Now, with Choi having no choice but to lead the group, it was Ma's job as leader and tank to stand right next to him. His normal outgoing behavior was nowhere to be seen, though, as every ounce of focus was spent observing their surroundings.
Of course.
The same could be said for Beck
I
as
say it's a very
since
dangerous
ever since
situation they're in,
entering
of
the
course.
tunnels,
Yeah,
he
Jesus
hadn't
Christ.
said a word. He was now using his Eyes of the Beast to detect even the slightest changes of magical energy. The only hunter who remained the same way they always were was Cha with her typical calm, composed attitude. It was once they arrived at the egg chamber that the ants they fought here were simply the nursery guards. They were lesser evolved versions of the ants that were now the Queen's Guards. This brings us back to the Japanese side, where Goto would arrive at Team C's Massacre.
Damn.
The novel didn't describe how said massacre happened, but when compared to the manhwa, the anime was a perfect execution of their execution.
Oh.
Now, you might be wondering how it is Kenzo got injured before this, but it was simply because the ants were more organized than he thought. By attacking with military tactics and flying
Right. So we don't actually in the manhwa you don't see them get killed off. Right.
in a battle formation, the intelligence they exhibited was far beyond what he was expecting. It was another example highlighting the ants' crazy evolution. Now, it was in the novel that Team C actually had 5 S-ranks, since the overall strike force was all 20 of Japan's S-rank hunters. That being the case, the fact all 5 were killed regardless made their executions all the more worrying. Their bodies didn't indicate any sort of battle either, so where Goto's teammates assumed it was a fight involving multiple ants, Goto
Just the
immediately knew
one.
it was one. The lack of ant corpses made such a conclusion clear. Their eaten heads also indicated the same cause of death, so when combining that with the fact that this was the work of only one monster, the conclusion Goto came to was that this had to have been done by the raid boss. He would then call headquarters and ask for the location of the queen, wanting to confirm whether his suspicion was true or not.
Oh, right.
You
Okay,
see,
makes sense.
with Japan being one of 3 countries possessing a satellite equipped with magic energy detection technologies, it was very easy to pinpoint where exactly the queen was whenever they wanted.
Oh.
It was when headquarters revealed the queen was still in the tunnels that Goto would panic and order every Japanese hunter off the island immediately.
Damn, yeah.
Reason being that the annihilation of 5 of their best hunters from one unknown enemy was far beyond any of their expectations. Yes, they did plan for all sorts of possibilities
But
and
not
variables,
this.
but whatever this was far past the scope of any of it. That's when Goto would remember something odd reported to him 4 months ago, involving the Ant Queen and a change in her power levels.
Oh.
Since she was being monitored 24/7, Japan was able to clearly see when its energy levels changed.
Huh.
That being the case, when a massive decline in her emissions was detected almost 4 months ago, Japan's best researchers deemed this the Queen's lifespan coming to its end. With its detected magical energy less than half of what it usually was, this was the only conclusion they could come to.
Huh.
1 month was all it took for the Queen's levels to return back to normal, though, so with researchers now stumped with regards to what this was, Goto couldn't help but think perhaps that was related to this. So, it was as he wondered more about who this mysterious enemy was that the Korean team would be dealing with the remnants of guards before the boss room. Min had given buffs tailored to each of his party
Poor
members,
guy,
so
man.
that gave a better idea of what each member's role was.
He didn't want to be
Most
there.
did make sense given each member's known abilities, but some of you might be shocked to see Cha with more of a bruiser-type buff. Considering how she was the main tank for her own guild, it made sense to give her a boost in both offense and defense.
Okay.
It's a role we'll see come more into play in the boss room. For any ants that did get past the front line right now, Min was more than capable of handling them himself.
Oh, cool.
Yes, being a healer did mean his combat skills weren't the greatest, but when compared to other hunters,
He's
they were still at the A rank
Right,
level.
cool. Oh, okay,
It was
cool.
more than enough power to handle at least 1 or 2 ants. 5 minutes was all it took to handle the second wave of ants before the boss room, mostly because Cha's buff made her way more efficient. Where before she was slaying the same number of ants as everyone else, now she was killing double what Beck was. It gave the squad a lot more time to work with. Since getting here took about 15 minutes from landing, that left about 30 minutes to kill the boss then evacuate. They needed to leave extra time to make it back to the point from which they entered from. It was once the team got close to the boss room that Beck would sense only 8 guards and the queen. There wasn't a whole army like how we saw in the anime, but rather these 9 lone targets making the battle a lot more intimate.
Oh.
Part of the reason this is important to note is because a specific strategy was come up with to deal with them. You see, with each guard being as strong as an S rank, Ma tanking all of them simply wasn't possible. If they were gonna take these ants on properly, then a secondary tank was needed to draw aggro from the Queen's guards. So, given that Cha was the main tank for her own guild, it made sense to set her as the secondary tank.
Right.
She would be the primary guard while Ma preoccupied the Queen.
Buffs make sense now
This
as well,
led
cool.
her to engage with a skill called Tremor of Provocation, which, as an AoE taunt, drew aggro from all the guards and the Queen. Ma would then use his own Battle Cry of Provocation, which, unlike Cha's skill, was a single target taunt drawing attention from only the Queen. So, with the guards and Queen now split, all Ma had to do was endure. He simply stood tall and prayed his efforts were enough to protect both himself and his colleagues. It was at this point the cameraman would try to step up, but Min's forceful pullback was a lot stronger than he expected. To add to why Min did that, it was essentially because no one was responsible for keeping the cameraman safe other than himself.
Oh. Okay.
With the boss fight now well underway, not a single hunter had time to look out for him anymore. So, this was a message to which the cameraman had zero response to, but he was thrown back by just how powerful Min seemed. Though physically he was the weakest S rank, not only did his aura completely overwhelm his own, but his strength was many levels greater as well. It made clear the difference between an S rank and an A rank. This brings us to a scene I was pretty surprised they didn't include, since it does well to showcase the far-reaching impact of Jeju Island across the country. Meet Grandma and Grandpa.
Okay.
An old couple where one's interested in the raid and the other not. Grandpa used to be highly interested in all things related to Jeju Island, but lately he found himself apart from it. The reason he was so invested before was because the day the gate first broke there was the day he lost his only son. It was an event that caused him to become a massive supporter of hunters too, since what other way was there to avenge his son and help the people he could? So, for years, Grandpa would donate lots of money to the Hunter Association, filling his heart with anticipation that this raid would be the one to avenge him.
And then they just didn't.
He was so caught
do
up
it,
in
yeah.
seeing it happen that in the days before the raid he couldn't even sleep. This, of course, filled him with high expectations too, but the more eager he was, the bigger the disappointment when those raids ultimately ended in
Failed,
failure.
yeah.
So, it was during the third raid that the news would say all the things that they were saying now, leading Grandpa to feel like he was betrayed since it all turned out to be a lie. The reporters always said how the raid was going to work this time, but with each
They
attempt,
didn't,
the outcome was always the same. Eventually, Grandpa would stop talking about hunters altogether, as he had stopped expecting the one thing he wanted most from them. To him, the subjugation of the ants was a dream long gone now. It's the reason why he's so grumpy here, and it's also why he's so emotionally invested shortly after. It was before he would have this change of heart, though, that Grandma would show her faith all the way through. She never gave up hope that these hunters could avenge their son. She did feel bad that such young people were seen getting injured, but she also cheered whenever they made progress. Like, with each Queensguard the team took out, both her and the neighbors around her
They
were
were
all
cheering.
yelling.
Yeah.
It was a sentiment of hope shared across the entire country. It was when only 2 guards were left that's when Grandpa would join her, showing nothing but anticipation for the success of the hunters currently fighting. Both were overcome with emotion as they reminisced of the last memory they had with their son. It was a celebration for the job he'd just secured over at Jeju Island. So, this scene may not seem like much, but what it does give is an inside view into the perspective of the everyday person.
Yeah.
Last episode, Chairman Go was worried about the diminishing faith in the Hunter Association, and this right here was the scene to prove it.
Yeah, that's the proof of it.
That notion that an entire nation was depending on them was really made clear. Now, for the sole TV station that was reporting the raid, its audience rating had reached a new viewership record of 85%. For context on how much that was, even if South Korea was to reach the finals of the World Cup tomorrow, no studio would even come close to that. Everyone was way more interested in the country about to become one of the few who've successfully cleared an S-rank gate. With only America, China, Russia, and France completing one before,
Oh, wow,
this Korea-Japan
okay.
team was about to become the 7th to ever do so. So, given how rare of an occurrence this was, the director couldn't help but think about all the money he was about to make. That's when the howling screech could be heard from his feed, along with an update regarding the alarming news that the Japan teams were withdrawing. This brings us to the fight with the Queen herself, which, honestly, the anime did better than both.
Cool.
They added quite a lot to Cha's scenes, and the panels which the manhwa depicted beautifully were brought to life as best they probably could.
Awesome.
I do still like to appreciate
Yo.
how amazing the manhwa looks, though. It was after getting healed from the acid attack that Ma would activate the defense skill Advanced Fortification, enabling him to endure the Queen's attacks easily now. The rest would jump in and force the Queen into a corner, leading Beck to see that this was it for her. His instincts revealed exactly how she felt up until the screech happened. It was once the fight was over that the novel and anime would show this brief moment of celebration, but in the manhwa there was no such time for that.
Oh.
As soon as the Queen was dead, the Ant King would be there.
It just
shortly
turns
after.
up. Whoa.
It was right before it showed up, though, that Hunter Ma would get the call confirming the Japan team's withdrawal. Immediately, everyone began to assume this situation was futile, since if 20 S-rank hunters couldn't even hold off the ants for 30 minutes, then how could the 6 of them fend off an entire army indefinitely?
What's interesting is, as well, and it probably is what happened within the story. Obviously, I have no idea. They're running away now because of the king. You know, Giru, is it? Or whatever his name is. So they can just blag later on that that's why they retreated and it was never in the plans in the first place. Weird, because obviously initially they were going to do this. They were going to run, leave them in the dungeon, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's if anyone's alive.
It was a bad situation turned worse when he showed up. With the Ant King's footsteps sending shivers down their spine, the hunters present could only stare in awe at it. Cha would be the first to recognize something was incredibly wrong, since for a monster so ominous, she couldn't sense its presence at all. The Ant King was a being she could only sense with her eyes. This was a discrete level of power she'd only ever felt once before, and that was from Sung himself.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
as she
cool.
stared listlessly at the oppressive aura this Ant King emanated, she could only imagine fighting it was akin to facing off against Sung. It was a fearsome thought that caused her to shudder and restricted her breathing.
Well,
Ma, as the leader, needed to make a quick decision here, but as logical as it was to just fight the monster, a strong sense of unease prevented him from giving the order.
it just walks
It was when he
past.
finally overcame every basic instinct telling him to run that the Ant King had already gotten behind him. In a flash, it moved to the Queen without a single hunter noticing. It was speed that confirmed this was in fact a threat unlike any they'd ever faced.
That art is so sick.
So, it didn't simply walk like how we saw in the anime, and it didn't eat the Ant Queen either.
Oh.
It instead roared so menacingly it brought everyone to their knees.
Whoa.
It's not clear whether this was an attack or not, but the sheer intensity of it was enough to paralyze everyone. Only Cha remained standing, albeit just barely.
Ha!
That's when the Ant King would choose to focus her, striking her on the side of the head and rendering her unconscious.
Damn.
The rest of the fight is depicted very faithfully to the manhwa, but does differ slightly when it comes to the novel. So, as shocking as it was to see Cha removed from the fight instantly, every hunter present knew the longer they hesitated, the less likely it was for them to survive. It was a mindset that led Ma to grab the Ant King with a bear hug, restricting its movements until his opponent would sever his arms from the inside. It was then Beck knew he had to intervene, because to not do so now meant Ma would have been killed right there. This forced the Ant King to switch his targets, defeating everyone until Ma would enter again. Turns out the others had been healed too, so every hunter minus Cha got to get a beatdown a second time. It was once Ma had returned for the third that finally the Ant King would clue into the existence of a healer. You see, Min's camouflage was working perfectly. The Ant King truly had no idea where he was, but now that he knew Min was around, there were several ideas it had to work around it, one of which was to use Ma as bait. So, the Ant King decided to constantly damage him by giving him the Loki treatment, but held back just enough in order to keep him alive. That way, it would look as if he was about to kill him, forcing Min to have to heal Ma over and over again. This created for a constant output of healing magic, from which the Ant King could then pinpoint Min's location.
Oh my god.
You see, small bursts made it impossible to hone in on where it was coming from, but a steady stream of magic would eventually become perceptible to anyone.
Oh, that's so clever.
This would be how the Ant King found Min, ultimately leading to his death. Eating his head then allowed it to gain Min's strength and knowledge, which is a topic I'll actually cover in an extra cut content video. The way this monster became the Ant King is actually a small side topic of its own. Now, it was when the Ant King asked Beck where the Human King was that in the novel Beck would straight up out Goto and say he was outside. As cowardly as it was, Beck had no choice but to use Goto as a means to buy time for him and his teammates. Now, considering how the outcome of Goto's fight is still inconclusive, I'll wait till next week to talk about how that
He's
went.
so dead though,
If
isn't
you're
he?
wondering
Come
why
on.
Goto decided to call himself the king, though, you'd be surprised to know it wasn't entirely out of hubris. It was actually a firm belief that stemmed out of a position he planned to hold in the future.
Right.
Since Japan's true plans were to subjugate Korea and create an empire, Goto knew the only viable person to assume that throne was him.
Right.
So, when he really thought about what it was the Ant King was asking, Goto had no problem confirming he was the king. To him, he had every right to say he was. It was only a matter of time before such a position was solidified as truth. At least, that's what he thought anyway. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode. Don't forget to check out the Solo Leveling merch, and be sure to subscribe if you want to see more. Until next time, though.
Ciao. Damn. That was so interesting. So the anime added stuff, but also took stuff out. That's also cool to see. God damn. That, I like the clever explanation as to how, where the healer was. It was frustrating in the anime where the guy, the tank dude's like, we've got a really good healer, and then he's like, ooh, okay, where is he? Okay, there we are, dead. That's cool. He used the whole nearly killing him over and over to see where the healing magic is coming from, because it's a constant flow. That's so clever. Oh, that was. And I really want to know, because I read this somewhere that, because he talks like him in the anime, the healer dude, after he bites his head off, doesn't he? And so it's like he learns and adapts and takes knowledge from people that he kills by not gnawing on their head. So, yeah, I'd love to know a little bit more into that. That's awesome. We'll check that out when that happens. I can't wait to watch. What time are we on now? I've still got another 2 hours to wait after to see a new episode. I'm so excited. Thanks for watching.